When do people fall in love with France and the French language? Perhaps it's the day their seventh grade French teacher walks into the classroom and says, "Aujourd'hui, on va parler français." Or maybe it's the morning they take a bite out of their first buttery croissant and begin a love affair with French food. Perhaps it's the moment they see a picture of the Eiffel Tower on a travel poster and say, "I want to go there." Or the day they decide to do something new and join their local Alliance Française. For our guest today, author Susie Morgenstern, it was actually none of the above. At the age of 21, she left her comfortable life in New Jersey and moved to Nice. She knew only a few words in French, had never tasted French food, and knew little, if anything, about France. And yet, over 54 years later, she still lives in Nice, speaks French fluently, has written over 150 books in French, and is one of France's most popular authors for young readers. Why did she move to France? How did she adapt to a new culture? How did she learn French? And above all, how did Susie Morgenstern become la plus française des auteurs américaines? Let's ask her right now. Bonjour Susie et bienvenue.
Bonjour, Aileen. Bonjour to
I was going to start and say, how's the weather there? Because the sun didn't rise until just 5 minutes ago, and it's 11 o'clock here. And it came out, as we were talking before, it came out. So I think you have brought a ray of sunshine to an otherwise dismal day.
I live in Nice, and I dream of a rainy day. And today is a very rainy day, but it's a day when my children came from Paris, and I'm very unhappy for them. They come for a little sunshine and there is none. So it's going to rain all weekend. And normally I would just be delighted, but I'm not.
Well, you're welcome here anytime you want. We have plenty of what you're looking for. Anyway, let's get started. In your recent autobiography, which is Mes 18 exils, and by the way, I love the cover. It's a wonderful cover.
It's a cover by Serge Bloch. We've been working together for 40 years, and one of our old books just came out. It's called Une vieille histoire. It's a beautiful book, very atypical, where I talk about my mother-in-law and how she hid her two little boys during the war in Nice. And that's with Serge Bloch. And the publisher of that book was called La Farandole. It was the publisher of the Communist Party in France. And I had originally illustrated the book with lots of Jewish symbols. And the publisher told me, no, that will prevent normal children from enjoying the book.
Okay.
And I met Serge Bloch. They absolutely didn't want me to meet Serge Bloch. I met him secretly in a cafe in Paris. And he turned out to be the son of the kosher butcher of Colmar. And so I told him to sneak in a few symbols where he can. And he did. And the publishers never saw them. And it did not prevent normal children from enjoying the book.
I look forward to reading that. But in Mes 18 exils, you talked about what led you to move to France at the age of 21. And I wonder if you could, for those people who might not have read your book, if you could give us like a brief synopsis of how you got from New Jersey, home of Bruce Springsteen and others, to
Frank Sinatra.
Frank Sinatra, of course, the whole list, and of course Philip Roth.
I went to High School with Frankie Valli and the Jersey Boys.
So how did you end up, and how did you end up in Nice?
Well, I spent my junior year in Jerusalem, and one morning in Jerusalem, I saw this man who was it. I asked my grandmother once, I said, Bubby, how do you know when you're in love? And she said, oh, you'll see him, you'll know. And I saw him across a big university cafeteria, and I said, that's him. And I walked over with my tray, and I plopped the tray down, and I said, Shalom. And that was the only thing I could say to him. He was French. I didn't speak French. His English was not very good. And that was it. And that he came to teach in NYU, and we got married. No, we got married first, and then he taught in NYU. And he didn't like it. He just didn't like it. And he didn't like the food. He wasn't so crazy about my family, my invasive family. The days when there was no Le Monde in the kiosk in Times Square, it was the end of the world. And I thought, if I want to keep the guy, I better go where he is, where he comes from. And so we came. It was, I was totally unconscious of what I was doing. I just followed him. Had I known, wow. I left my mother, I left my sisters, my family, mostly my language.
Mhm.
I didn't speak a word of French, 3 words.
So,
Bonjour,
yeah, sorry.
merci. And
So
I thought,
so you had no plan at all? You had no plan whatsoever of what you were going to do once you crossed the ocean and got to France?
I had no idea what I was walking into. No plan. I had just gotten my BA. I had a baby, 2 months old. I took that baby on a student ship with 9 trunks, 9 trunks where my mother put cans of tuna fish, toilet paper. She thought I was going to a 3rd world country. And Jacques kept saying, we have toilet paper in France. We have tuna fish in France. And she put dollar bills in all my clothes. She pinned dollar bills to all my clothes. And and she gave me a baby carriage, like a Cadillac of a baby carriage. And no taxi in Paris could take that baby carriage. So we walked across Paris with the baby and the baby carriage, and me mumbling, where did you bring me? They can't even take our baby in their cab in our baby carriage.
So then you what'd you take, the Aurelia? Was that the name of the ship? The famous Aurelia?
It was famine, the famine ship.
Famine ship, exactly, right. So then you ended up somehow, you didn't walk to Nice, I suppose did you take the train to Nice then?
Yeah, we took the train to Nice.
With the carriage and everything, oh.
And, lived in a tiny 2-room apartment with Jacques' parents. His father was a survivor of Auschwitz. I could talk to him because he spoke Yiddish. I couldn't talk to my mother-in-law at all.
So then here you are in Nice, and you have to do something. You have to go to school. What did you decide to go to school first? What did you, in order to learn the language, how did you go about doing that?
I think I didn't decide anything. Jacques I was sort of his Pygmalion. He registered me in school to get the equivalences of my BA, and then I did a master's, and then I did a PhD. This was all Jacques doing. He did all the administrative work. And there's such excellent baby care in France. You can put your kid in a crèche, and you bring the kid with wrinkled clothes and dirty hair, and and the kid comes out smelling like perfume and everything's ironed and beautiful. And my mother was calling me and saying, how could you put a baby in school? And it's criminal. And it was great.
So, what did you find the most difficult to adapt to when you got there? Especially since you didn't know the history, the literature, the customs, the language. Did you find things, I mean, besides not being able to speak the language?
I found the food very difficult because I had never eaten a vegetable in my life before going to France. Jacques made me eat a tomato. He opened my mouth like a baby and went, oh. And when my mother came, she would cry. And she said, such a young, promising girl has to peel vegetables. And she cried to her friends and said that we were so poor that we didn't even have a television. Well, we never had a television. We never got a television. Even when we weren't so poor, we didn't. And yeah, things were, when I think back, everything was difficult, but I wasn't aware of it. I was just so unconscious, in love. I had a baby. I went to school. I learned French, and I didn't formally learn French. I never formally learned grammar or French. I never learned grammar in any language. But I managed. People then didn't speak English at all. Now they do. But then no. What I missed later on, and you can see that I'm wearing my Halloween sweater, which I in Marshall's 35 years ago. We used to come, my sisters and I used to come to the United States with the biggest suitcases you ever saw in your life, and we'd go to Marshall's. And we'd see the sign Marshalls, and we'd all have orgasms. And in we went, filled those shopping carts to the brim, and we'd spend hours cutting off the tags and filled whole waste paper basket with the tags and put them in these huge suitcases. I bought everything for my kids, my grandkids. Of course, now I couldn't do that. But I would buy size 11 shoes for my baby feet. And I wouldn't buy one pair, I'd buy 12 pairs. There's no size 11 in France. So I was not conforming to any kind of standards in France. They didn't have my size, they didn't have my feet. But I'd go to America and fill up those suitcases.
But did you find it difficult to relate to people because you didn't share the same cultural identity and experiences, and of course your sense of humor? I mean, it's a different sense of humor. You have points of reference that are completely different. That must have been kind of frustrating for you, no?
What I remember is trying so hard to concentrate on what people were saying until I realized that they weren't saying much. It was just not worth concentrating on. Whole dinners of concentrating while my husband was talking about the university union.
And you didn't, what were you doing? Were you following the conversations or not?
I was eating, but very quickly I got used to French food very quickly. And no, what was I doing? I was trying to listen. Of course, we spoke English at home.
Yeah, at home. So, and in chapter 11, that's my favorite chapter of the book of Mes 18 exils, the chapter that's called Être émigré, you talk about things that made life challenging for you. And I was curious if you could talk about a few of the things besides the language, some of the things that you have, like a list of about a dozen things that were difficult, and the things, sort of the pros and the cons of France. And I wonder if you could just talk about a few of them, and if you think they're still relevant today, or if things have evolved for you.
You want to give me some prompts?
I'm saying, no, some prompts. Well, for example, like, will you go into a store and the salesperson is, acts in a certain way, where the customer is not necessarily.
We have nothing for you. She wouldn't even let me in. The people were, I felt very cold. It was like an iron curtain of cold. And then I went back home to New Jersey and went in the store, and the saleswoman says, "Hi, honey, how are you today?" And I said, "Do I know you?" Because I got used to the French way, that Americans are so overwhelmingly friendly, and here it takes time. And I got used to waiting till people came around. Like I would pass the bus stop. This is something my mother always did, and say, "I'm going the same way as you. You want to come in my car?" And it was, nobody would come in my car. It was like I was a rapist picking up victims. And it was all just totally out of generosity and environmentalism. And no, nobody would come into my car. I would say hello to people in elevators, and they'd look at me as if I were really a maniac.
Is that still valid today, do you think?
Pretty much. And one thing that really strikes me is getting onto Air France after a stay in America, and the coldness just hit me. But that's not true anymore. Somebody must have told them to smile.
Yeah, but even you mentioned something like people saying, well, bonjour, madame, that still exists. That's just part of the culture of France. So people are formal, and monsieur, dame, and all that. That's still is pretty much the same, no?
Yeah, they called me Madame Jacques.
Madame Jacques. What else? And stores, are they still closed, for example, between 12 and 4? You mentioned that in the book.
No.
Things like that. That has evolved over the years. But those are some of the things I guess you found surprising.
Stores are even opening on Sunday now. My beloved Monoprix is open on Sunday. Of course, I don't go on Sunday, but it's open. Yeah.
And well, then when you come back to the States, what do you find most surprising here, besides maybe somebody calling you dear or hun in the store? Are there things that surprise you here?
Well, I still love the shopping in the States. I find everything much cheaper, and the language in the States has evolved. Like I used to buy mountains of books in English, and I'd take that, I'd bring that mountain to the cash register, and the cashier would say to me, "Want a bag?" I said, "Want a bag?" "What?" "Want a bag?" I said, "Could you write that down?" He said, "Do you want a bag?" I said, "Well, why wouldn't I want a bag? How will I get out of here without a bag?" And so reluctantly, he puts the books in a bag. And I know now that it wasn't environmentally friendly to ask for a bag. But yeah, I feel now, 54 years after, when I go back to the United States, I feel like a Martian. you know, a man from outer space. I don't even understand the language. Last time I had the most trouble getting into the subway, the New York subway. And people would say, you have to swipe it, swipe it, swipe it. Couldn't swipe it.
Well, yes, but then you have the ticket you used to have the ticket in the metro in Paris, so that the person used to punch. I remember those days.
I will never be, I am French. I'm a French citizen. I vote. I have dual nationality, but I will never be considered French because you can't be considered French with an accent.
Really?
Even, no, there's no way. There's no way that anybody, I still, when I open my mouth to say bonjour, people say, passez bonnes vacances, madame. It's a long vacation, 54 years.
Ah. Wow. So you're still like the American in Nice?
Oh, I'm very much American. I can't shake the identity because I can't shake the accent. My grandmother spoke English 75 years after she arrived, just like the day she arrived, but she was American. And no, you can't be French with an accent.
And I think there's probably some people that are joining us today that might feel the same way, French people or people from other countries that are joining us today that might feel the same way in this country.
I don't know.
Works, you know, there are a lot of people who are adapting in a lot of different places. So I don't know if they feel the same way. We've had some conversations with some people, and we had some conversations with people who've had grandparents who have been in other countries. And I guess you always maintain a little bit of yourself in there.
Rachel, do you feel, can you be considered an American?
Myself, I'm not an American citizen yet. I have a permanent residence card, but I'm not an American citizen. I feel like with my accent, probably people will still be questioning, even if I had the American nationality. I assume people would still be questioning it, but I don't know, maybe things are different. What I do know, and I agree with you, is that my grandmother, who arrived in France when she was maybe 21, 22, and she lived 60 years in France, and she was still considered a foreigner, even though she only had French nationality. She didn't have any dual citizenship anymore, because at the time when she arrived, it was not possible to have dual citizenship. So I understand what you mean. She came from Spain.
Mm-hmm. And Christine, do you consider yourself American?
I'm like you. I have dual nationality. It's a bit mixed bag. After 37 years, I feel sometimes very American, but I think I'm I'm really a hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, like I still go back to France. I love being there. I come to to Larchmont, to the United States, and I feel like home. I think I'm a real hybrid. I love both.
I never lived in the United States as an adult. You know, I spent all my adult life in Nice, in France and Nice.
And Susie, your daughters, they're French. For them, they're French, right?
They're French. They have no accent. They're very, very much integrated in France. And when I used to pick up my daughter Maya at school, she would put her hand in front of her mouth and forbid me to talk, because she didn't want her friends to hear what an atypical mother she had. And I was not allowed to talk. She was really ashamed she didn't want to show me off at all. And then when we walked far enough away, she said, okay, you can talk now.
Wow. But you, what did you do? Did you speak English at home and then your husband spoke French and then they had the French in school?
I spoke English and I wouldn't even listen to anything they had to say. I played deaf if they spoke to me in French. And so they would go tell all their little stories to their father because it was easier. It had become easier to speak French than to speak English. And when my oldest daughter got her agrégation in English, she came home and she said, well, it's thanks to the wonderful professor I had. I said, what?
Well, I
No,
hope she met you.
no, thanks to me.
Uh, so let's go back to learning the language a little bit. How long did it take you to be able to converse? You were doing diplomas in France, but in English?
Yeah.
So
And
then-
I got my diplomas thanks to 1968 because they dropped the translation tests. And it was very cool, very cool.
So when did you start to speak French?
I probably started to speak French 6 months later.
Mhm.
You know, from the street, from people around me. I listen to the radio a lot. I love the French radio.
Really? Didn't you have to concentrate? I find the radio very difficult myself because I can't see the faces. I could be in a room with a radio playing and they could be talking about the news, something on the news, and I could just not hear it. But
Well,
that's a really concentrate.
I think I mostly learned French from the radio. And my husband. And I immediately started, after I got my doctorate, I knew that I didn't want to go into literary criticism. And I started writing children's books then. And I started writing them in French, which was a big surprise to me because I sat down, I thought I'd be writing in English. But when I finished the day, I saw that I had written in French.
And so you weren't like translating from English to French in your head? It just became automatic, like spontané?
Yeah, I don't think so. I was reproducing conversations I heard around me. No, I don't think I was translating in my head.
And you know, in your books, I marvel at the amount of slang and vernacular, the language that you use. Did you make a concerted effort to learn those? Did you learn it from your children, just as you say, from the street? You know, from hearing people in the street.
It just happens, you know. It happens like it happens to a baby who learns to talk.
Mhm.
You know, it just hits you. You get it, and everything I heard, I would repeat like a baby.
Mhm.
Being in the country is so different from studying a language. You know, everything I did was in French. All interactions were in French. So I learned quite fast.
So you sink or swim.
I still make mistakes. My husband used to correct everything that I'd write. I would waltz around him. Said, "Did you correct it yet? Did you?" He hated that job, but he did it. And if there were 3 mistakes in a line, he wrote at the end of the line, "Merde."
Ah.
And I have manuscripts where it's written merde, 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 25 lines per page. I'm actually looking for those manuscripts right now because I wrote this book about writing. It's called Écrire, c'est respirer. It's coming out in April. And they want me to send them documents for the book, and I'm looking for that merde. I often use swear words in my books, and you see the kids looking up the page where I say something, and they are shocked.
Well,
I said, but I heard it in the courtyard of school. I mean, I heard it. That's why I use it.
well, what do they say? You have to repeat a word a certain amount of times before you get it. So you got the word mailed, repeat it 25 times. You knew the word afterwards.
I had a teacher in high school who used to say, use it 3 times and it's yours.
Mm-hmm. That's a trick. Do you think that maybe new language learners should start with children's books to learn, as you did? You said you learned sort of, you were immersed in a country as if you were a newborn. So maybe, and little children learn to read with little books, not adult books. Do you think that maybe language learners should perhaps read some children's books?
I think it would be a great idea.
Do a Mommy and Me?
A great idea to use children's books. It's short and you get a whole story, and the language should be easier. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
What do you think about BD? You know, about cartoon, would be comic books, although it doesn't have the same resonance in English, but like the French comic books for readers, let's say you have difficulty.
It's a great art form in France. It's really considered like the 8th art, and it's very, very prestigious. And BD comics writers are revered in France. I have a hard time reading comics because I think it's so much more difficult than just reading books. You have to read the picture and read the what are they called in English? Bulle.
The bubbles.
Bubbles. You have to read the bubbles, and I was just on the jury of a literary prize offered by Mickey Mouse magazine. I had to read 14 comic books, and they're big things, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, I would read one a day, and it took me a long time to read them. But of course, you get the knack. On the 14th, it became easier and easier to read them. I accepted this presidency because my grandson loves Mickey magazine.
I remember that when the kids were growing up. I don't know if this is the right juncture for a bit. I don't know if you have it handy, but you sent us a little manuscript of a project you're working on about an Alliance Française in Boise. And for some of our audience today, I thought it might be relevant, the section that about the young lady who passes in front of the Alliance Française. You have that handy?
I don't have it printed, so I would have to get rid of you in order to find.
Okay, fine.
I can tell you about it. It's a novella, which is going to be a novel, about a young girl who took her year off after high school instead of going to university. And she works in a fast food, grilling hamburgers. And one day on her way home, she passes a sign on a glass door that says, learn French. And she passes this Alliance Française and she sees people drinking some red stuff in a wine glass, and she walks in and starts courses, and this is going to change her life. I had a lot of fun studying about Idaho and Boise, which I know nothing of, but I really wanted it to be someplace way out. Had I met you before, I would have put the Alliance Française in White Plains.
You can always change it. It's not printed yet, is it?
I
We
could.
have fast food here.
I'm gonna look it up. But
Um,
Daisy is so exotic to me.
no, absolutely. But and there is an alliance of sorts, but it's not it's not a very big one, I guess, in Boise. But let's switch over to education just a little bit, and then we're going to talk about writing. And somewhere after education and before writing, maybe Christine can jump in with a few questions from the chat, because I see them flashing, but I don't have them accumulate on the side. You write a lot about education in France. Of course, La Sixième is very special, but can you share some of the basic differences between education in France and the United States as you knew it? I mean, you experience it on every level with your children and yourself as a older and younger and older, younger in the States, older in France, but maybe some of the differences, and if they exist today, or has the educational systems evolved for you?
Well, I have this permanent nostalgia about number 5 school in Belleville, New Jersey, and Belleville High School. It was just fun. Future teachers of America, future lawyers of America, future this and future that, and clubs. And I was in the jazz band, and I was in the orchestra, and I was editor of the Belleville High School Spotlight. And we did so much. I mean, we did everything except learn something. Like, didn't learn languages, didn't learn philosophy, geography. I had no idea where France was. History, we did have geography in grade school. I remember filling in maps with every state and its capital. I loved doing that. But outside, geography didn't go even up to Canada or to Mexico and South America. It was just the United States. Trenton is the capital of New Jersey, you should know.
So, and in comparison with France, when you experienced it, did your children talk to you about their school? I don't know if you've been related with the other mothers.
I'll tell you about my grandson, Sasha. I asked him how's school. He's 10. And he said, I don't think this is a conversation for a friendly lunch.
Oh.
I always felt so sorry for my kids. First of all, you take a little baby that's 2.5, 3 years old to the door, the gate of a sinister looking school, and all the other parents say to their little baby, travaille bien.
Mm-hmm.
And what do we say in America? We say, have fun. And that's very significant of the difference in attitudes. It's no fun. Belleville High School, we had an auditorium and wonderful performers. I lived in a town that was totally Italian, Belleville, New Jersey. Frankie Valley was a student, Connie Francis. They all came from Belleville High School, and they would sing in the morning. And there was so much to federate the students. We loved our school. We loved our school. Nobody loves their school here.
You think it's the same now?
Did you, Rachel?
I liked my school. I was fine, but I liked primary school, and kindergarten was fun. Middle school, not so fun. High school was fine in France, but I think, again, it depends where you grow up. And I grew up in a region on the west coast of France where it was really nice, and we had great weather as well, similar to Nice. And, you know, it was a small town, so I guess it was easier. But I think it's different depending on the city where you are.
I don't know. It was always sinister. My kids, would come home from school nervous wrecks, and they had so much homework after, they went from 8 to 5, 8 to 4:30, and then they'd come home, and I wrote a note for my daughter Maya every single day, a note to the teacher. I was very inventive. I would say, Maya couldn't do her homework because her uncle from America came. Maya couldn't do her homework because she had a headache. Maya couldn't do her homework because her mother was sick and she had to make dinner. And then once she had the note, she'd sit down and do her homework. But wow, what homework. What homework. And now, well, my granddaughter, Emma, who's 20 and lives with me, goes to the University of Nice, and there's no joy whatsoever. I mean, she's happy to go this year because last year it was all on the computer, but no joy, no excitement, no passion. I used to go to classes and just, I was in a trance listening to the teachers. No.
But do you feel from a subject point of view, and let's say being well-rounded, do you feel that there is a different kind of education from one country to the other? I've experienced both because our kids went to bilingual school, so they saw both worlds. But is there, like, you say you didn't learn history and literature, for example. We learned literature when we went to school here. We learned history, although it was centered on ourselves, on our country.
Bilingual schools have the best of both worlds, but the French, I've always been very harsh and critical of French schools. And if ever I said something at a parent-teachers meeting, the other parents would say, one man came over to me and said, "You, the assassin of les peaux rouges, the Indians, you dare tell us what to do?" All my books are full of criticism of the schools. And my last book, which is called Maître Joker, a continuation of a book I wrote 25 years ago called Joker. I listened to a criticism of it on France Culture yesterday. I mean, I sat there and saying, what? I wrote that book. They talked for a half an hour about that book and the philosophy of the book. And, it was much too idealistic for them.
It's interesting. Do you think that with all the distractions, the electronic distractions that children face today, that we can still keep them interested in reading?
It's a very big subject, Aileen.
Okay. Well, we'll talk again next. Can you come back in March?
It's such a problem. It's such a problem. Our books sell a lot. I go to schools and all the children read the books upside down. They ask me questions that I don't even know how to answer. I don't remember. And the kids, at least in primary school, read. But I don't know what the future is going to bring. I think it'll bring something else. When I grew up, it was very ill regarded to read. When my mother saw me with a book, she would yell and say, "You're wasting your time. You'll never find a husband. Men don't like intellectuals." I used to hide to read. And now it's all the screen stuff that we think is bad for them. I don't know. They get their fictions in other places. They get their stories in other places. But I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, what kind of mutations there'll be in humanity because of the screens, but it worries me a lot.
Yeah, me too. Christine, do you want to hop in for a minute and then we'll go to the actual art of writing? And there were a few questions that came up.
Yes, a lot. One of them, Susie sort of answered it. How long did it take you to feel comfortable speaking French?
Yeah, I would say 6 months, a year.
So that you, and then one question about also when you mentioned your trips back to America, one question from Jessica was, what frequency did you come back to the States? How often did you come back to the States?
As long as my mother was alive, I'd come back twice a year. I haven't been back in 3 or 4 years. And now when I come to the United States, I have nobody, I have friends, but I have not much family in the United States. So I come for professional reasons. I go to Lycée Français, Alliance Française. That's what brings me to America. And it's often in a completely French speaking environment.
One of the first questions from Christine was, not me, another one, was after how many years did you feel at home in France? You sort of answered that, but not completely. Do you feel at home?
I'm not made to feel at home, but what is our home? Our home is our house. Our home are our friends, my family. I would say I feel pretty much at home. Yeah, I would say I feel pretty much at home here and no longer at home in the United States.
There were two questions. Have you encountered any anti-Semitism in Nice? And is there a big Jewish community in Nice? From two different people?
There's a very big Jewish community in Nice. My house is kosher, so I have about 15 kosher butchers to choose from in Nice. I helped to found a conservative synagogue in Nice. It's called Mayan Or, very successful. We had beautiful high holiday services, and there are, I don't know the numbers, but it's a huge Jewish community in Nice from North Africa, from Algeria and Morocco, and very few Ashkenaz Jews. My father-in-law founded the Ashkenaz synagogue in Nice. So this is really my town, Nice. And as for anti-Semitism, there's always anti-Semitism. I think that nobody really loves us. Even friends at one point say something like "you people," and no, I'm very much aware and on the alert of anti-Semitism. I'm a little bit protected because people take me for an American and not a Jew. Although I certainly don't hide it in my books.
Do I have time for two more questions from?
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay.
So one was, what do you appreciate the most in French culture?
I should tell you that I am furiously in love with France now, after 54 years. I've just come back from a book fair at Saint-Étienne. Book fairs is a kind of French cultural art. Many towns are very proud of their book fair. Saint-Étienne Book Fair, it was just fantastic. It's a real form of culture. It's an art, the way they do these book fairs. They find just the thing for every author. I participated in a roundtable discussion called Bad Seed, Mauvaise Graine. And I was with an artist called Orlan. Do you know her? Orlan, she does body art with her own self. She's my age and she looks about 30 years younger. She does all kinds of things with her face and her body, and her hair is like a dunce cap, like this. It was so much fun, but it was fun putting the two of us together, and it's the organizers of these book fairs that do that. Once in a book fair in Voiron, I had written a book about chocolate, and my event was in the best chocolate shop. I think one of the best in the world. Their chocolate bar was used in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory film. And that was certainly one of the greatest moments in my life. They would pour me, the owner of the shop sat next to me and kept pouring me hot chocolate, and she had a tray of all their chocolates. Oh, take me back to Voiron. And all these, the book fairs, the libraries are, I don't know, I think so much more active in France. They have all kinds of events to get kids and people in, and they're beautiful, beautiful places. Of course, culture has been dead for 2 years, but the joy of going back to it, the Nice Book Fair, which was in September, people were just radiant, and they buy books. They buy books like crazy.
When you're talking about libraries, you mean French librairie, you mean the bookstores?
No, I mean libraries.
Oh, you mean the libraries, really libraries? Oh, okay.
Médiathèque, bibliothèque,
Okay.
and at the book fairs, I mean, people come and buy 10 books at a time. And even in very poor, deprived areas, you see these families coming and buying books.
So maybe there is a future.
I'm absolutely crazy about French culture, everyday culture.
And do you read novels in French?
I read almost only in French because all my friends send me their books, and I read their books. I just I met at the Nice Book Fair a writer called Catherine Cusset, and I bought 2 of her books, and now we write to each other every day. She has started a diary inspired by me. And so she sends me her diary and I send her my diary. And Christine has started a diary too. No, and I loved her books, Catherine Cusset. But I still love much more to read English than French.
Didn't Catherine Cusset come yeah, we had her as a guest some years ago at the Alliance Française.
I think it was just before I arrived in 2016 or 2017.
Wonderful books. Her last book is called La Définition du Bonheur. I highly recommend it.
I see a lot of questions, but I want to get to this next segment, and some of them will be answered. It's about the art of writing. You've always had a passion for writing. You wrote in a diary every day from the time you were very young, no?
7. My whole life in diaries.
Out of curiosity, growing up, you only saw your future as a mother. There's a lot of talk about in your family about women are going to get married and have children and everything. Did you think that you would become a writer as well?
You know, kids ask me that question. They always say, did you always want to be a writer? And I say, it's like saying, did you always want to be a woman? I had no choice in the matter. I am a writer. I have always been a writer. I spend my whole life writing. And George, who is here, George, my Swiss lover, is here at this meeting. And he knew from the beginning, he converted a room in his house as an office for me. And so he knew that's what he had to do to seduce this femme fatale.
But did you think that you were going to write then for younger readers? How did you think it would go down?
I think that motherhood oriented my professional writing for children. I always wrote, I was always a writer, but I was very inspired by my children.
Mhm.
And
how did you get yourself published in France? You're an American. It must have been difficult. It's hard enough to get published in any country.
the first book
Yeah.
I wrote, the first book was an illustrated book of the Hebrew alphabet, because I used to draw. I was an illustrator and that's also why I went to children's books, because I could draw them and write them.
Ah.
And my first book, I did big drawings of Hebrew letters. And one day a publisher came to eat in my house. He came along with friends of mine who were invited, and he said, he saw what I was doing. He said, I'm going to publish that. And he published it. And then he went bankrupt. And Jacques put me on a train one day to go to Paris, and I knocked at every door, and everybody sent me away crying. And
what books did you have with you when you were knocking on the doors? Which books did you bring with you?
It was Une vieille histoire.
Ah.
This book that's been republished 40 years later.
Mm-hmm. And then and what books have been like an instant success for you?
La Sixième was
La Sixième. And it still is, isn't it?
Yeah, 37 years after. That sort of tells you something about the education system, because nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. Children still identify with that book. And
your children didn't tell you about it though while it was happening, did they? I mean, it seems to me that you learned about it later.
Maya was very verbal. She didn't let me talk, but she talked a lot. She would open the door. This was middle school, collège, and she'd open the door and she'd say, "Mama!" And start telling me about how all the professeurs étaient vaches, elle a trop de devoirs.
Ils ont dit qu'ils étaient nuls.
Everything was new. There was choucroute for lunch. And I would just write it. I wrote it, and she would read it. She corrected it, in fact, and she was so excited about it. And every day she said, "Did you write today? Did you write today?" And that would be the first thing she'd do, is read what I wrote about her. And she now she reproaches me. And she says, I exploited her life for my fame and fortune.
What are the books you're most proud of beside that one?
Oh, there's a little book called Kumasava, because it sold about 3.5 copies. It's also illustrated by Serge Bloch. And it was something that really bothered me, that people said "Comment ça va?" and they didn't wait for the answer. And so I wrote about this. I tried to, how do you say, décortiquer comment ça va, the reaction to comment ça va. And I love that book, but it didn't sell, and I think it's probably not even available. Another book called Le Don, the gift, Le Don, about passion, about a violinist. And it was a CD. I don't think that's available either. I think it's probably my masterpiece. le don.
Did you think that you could have become a musician, or the writing was more important?
No, I don't think I could have become a musician because it's too physical and I'm too immobile, especially since I played the bass. No, I don't think it was too boring. When you write, you add something to the world that hasn't been there before. You take a page and you have all the power. You're God of that page. And sometimes I'm just so surprised by what comes out. I'm constantly surprised. Writing is a real adventure to me.
When you're writing a book, do you have some sort of a master plan? You say how many pages you're going to write per day? Does it just sort of flow, or do you write it in your diary? And do you work? It sounds like you're working on 100 projects at the same time. I don't know how you do it, but I can barely get out of bed in the morning. But you seem to have like several books and articles and meetings and
series, because these series that when they're successful, they want 3 books a year. So they're expecting 3 new perlas, and they're expecting 3 new familles trop de filles, series about too many girls in the family, and it's fun. I never wanted to do series, but it's so much fun. You really get to know your characters. Too many girls, famille trop de filles, there's about 28 volumes already. And yeah, I have a lot of things going on, and every email asks me to do something. Like for Montreuil, the big Montreuil book fair, the newspaper Libération is asking, it wants a whole newspaper written by children's writers and illustrators. And so they asked me for an article. This is something in addition to all the other projects. The French government asked me to participate in the jury of a book, a book contest. Every day, 3-4 people ask me to do something.
And you're in schools as well, right? And then you go visit schools.
I did a big tour of schools last week in Nice, but I go all over the place in schools. I'm going to Porto, to the Lycée Français. I'm going to Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon in the spring. I mean, it's really a very exciting life, except I see nothing but kids. I mean, I go to the most exotic places and I see nothing.
And you do workshops with the children?
I do a lot of workshops with the children, yeah.
I see. But you know, your books are so popular, and obviously in France and in many other countries. I saw you were published in about 20 different languages. But why is it that in the United States, we don't hear your name? It doesn't seem like you're well known here.
Right. It's
disappointing.
Difficult to get published in the United States, because the United States are such huge producers of books exported all over the world. So and the publishing process in the United States, the publisher has to be able to read the book in French, and they don't. So it's really difficult. There's a prize for a translated book. It's called the Margaret Batchelder Prize. I won it twice, and for the 2 books that were published in America, Secret Letters from 0 to 10. The year that I won that prize, I was the only candidate. That's to show you how many books are published from foreign languages.
But you don't do your translations, right?
I'm pretty poor translator. I translated one of my books all day yesterday, in fact. It's a book called I'll Sweep the Earth Clean, Je balayerai la terre. And I had a lot of fun translating it, because it's all in rhyme. So it was quite a challenge. and it's for an English publisher.
Mhm.
And
But you're
someone,
very popular in Korea and Japan, places like that.
Oh, I'm cosmic in Korea. I came to Korea, you would have thought Madonna had arrived.
Why is that?
They ju-
How did you get from here from Nice to Korea?
I think that they're so strict in their lives that somebody as nutty as me, really, and my books, they really please them.
Are there other French writers for jeunesse? Are there other French writers like you out there? I mean, is there anyone that compares in the size, the scope, the range of books that you write, the way you write, your sense of humor? I mean, there
Well,
must be, but I don't know who they are
when
particularly.
when my publisher, École des Loisirs, which is a great publisher, took my first manuscript, he said, okay, after all, I'll get all the American humor and I won't have to pay for the translation. That's Arthur Schmidt at École des Loisirs, a great publisher, a great publishing house. And there are dozens of other writers. France just got the biggest prize in world prize in children's literature. It's Jean-Claude Morleva. There were about 12 candidates for the prize in France alone. And Jean-Claude Morleva is a great writer. I really recommend anything he's written. There's dozens, if not several dozens. It's a very lively and wonderful domain. There's great children's writers. Not when I came, though. Not when I came. You know, the first prize I won was the Grand Prix du Livre pour la Jeunesse, and the Ministère de Jeunesse et Sport created that prize to encourage French people to write, because 95% of the children's books were translations at that time.
Mhm.
So here I come. It was an anonymous prize. We had to have a fake name, and my name was Charlotte Mazal, and I won the prize. So I had to go to get it, and they turned green when I showed up, because here it was, they were making a prize to encourage French writers to write children's books. And who won? A dumb American.
From New Jersey.
Belleville.
Is this going to be translated? Les 18 exils?
Book I would like to translate for my family. But I'm just so busy.
Do you think your friends back home, people you grew up with, would say, if they saw that you were they know that you're such a famous writer, they would say, oh, we knew she was going to be famous writer?
Well, I went to the reunion many years ago, the 45th high school reunion, and people would come over to me and they'd say, oh, Susie, yes, I remember you. You were so, and then they were at a loss. And they would all say, original. I don't see that book being published in America because nobody knows me there. It was a huge media success. It was a success, the book, but because I'm known here,
Yes.
and people buy the book.
You were on numerous shows on TV, interviews.
La Totale, just every newspaper. I went to Paris for 3 weeks and had 5 and 6 interviews a day.
Yeah.
And that's the first time it happened, because it's an adult book. Children's books don't get as much attention.
And you have a lot of awards that you've gotten over the years as well.
Well, I got the
Literary.
Légion d'honneur,
Yes.
and now I just got Ordre de Mérite.
Yes, it's very impressive. Plus all the different literary awards that you've received over the years for your books. So what's the secret of your success?
That's always fun. There's
Yeah.
never any money, but it's fun.
And what's the secret of your success?
Work. Work. I work.
Or at least you enjoy it.
Night every day.
Christina,
There must be something here. I don't know. There must be something here. You know, my sister is a huge celebrity in Israel, just because she's herself. She was interviewed once, and it made a big buzz, viral, and she can't walk in the street without being assailed by autograph hunters and getting her picture taken every place. Just being herself. I was the timid one in my family.
Christine, there were a few more questions I saw that flashed by.
Yeah.
Somebody asked if you'd been to the, Laurence asked if you had been to the salon in hier.
I'm always invited, and it's always at a time that I can't go.
Okay. Il y a d'autres questions?
Well, someone, Margarita from Chicago, asked if Susie could say a few words about Jacques Haddy, about the book Jacques Haddy.
Yes.
Well, it was when my husband died, Jacques, I couldn't write for children for 2 years. When you write for children, you have to have a bit of optimism. You have to take the child by hand. You can't be too dark, at least in my way of seeing children. And for 2 years, I couldn't write a children's book, and I wrote Jacques Haddy. This was 27 years ago. And I wrote and wrote all about Jacques, and you realize how little you know about the person you've been living with for so long. But it's a kind of archaeology, and I wrote that book mainly for my children and family, and I just put it away. And then a few years ago, a publisher asked me to write a book about how I became me, what I am. And I sent her Jacques Haddy, because what I thought was, how did I become what I am? It's Jacques. And I sent her Jacques Haddy, and not 24 hours later, she called me and said, what a gift you've given us. And she published it immediately. And this was not a media or commercial success, but I think it's modestly a very good book. So.
Yeah. Were there other questions?
There is some praise from someone, Naomi Dennis. Dennis says, I love Secret Letter from 0 to 10. It's so deserving of the award.
Well, she's my friend.
Oh.
So really, she has to love it. And she's a wonderful picture book writer, Naomi Dennis. And I have put all her books in my suitcase to show to my French publishers. And I think my French publishers will be seduced by her, her books. They're in the suitcase, Naomi. And you see, it's much easier to get published in France than to get published in America.
So two more questions, and then I think we've covered everything. Someone asked for the connection to Neuchâtel. If we read the book, we know. But...
Well, that's another wonderful book. It's called Fleurs Tardives, Late Bloomers, and it's an adult book. And it tells about my meeting George from Neuchâtel 17 or 18 years ago now. wonderful gift in my life. He's right on the screen, George. Hi, and he's he was a wonderful gift in my life. I met him 10 years after Jacques died. Every day, well, it took me 10 years of crying to be able to meet somebody else. We met on the internet, jewishcafe.com. George saw it flashing on his screen while he was reading Haaretz online, and he said, okay, well, it said free tries. He said, since it's free, I'll try. And it was just this serendipitous thing. We were on at the same time. We met. George came to Paris, and I said, yeah, he's okay. He's Swiss German, and we spoke Hebrew. It's a fun book, Fleur Caldive. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Maybe you'll bring the total of sales up to 100.
It's hard to get a hold of some of the books here, but I do love Lettres d'amour de Zéro à 10. That was a great book, by the way. I thank your friend Naomi, but I loved it too. It was a terrific book.
It's a BD now. It's become a BD. It's very pretty too.
Ooh. Are there other BDs of your books?
Yeah, La Petite Dernière, the book that I about my being 10 years old with my crazy sisters.
So if we go back, maybe to wrap this up, which we could go on forever, I go back to the dedication of Mes 18 Exils, where you say that you dedicate it to your family and friends, et tous les autres qui pensent que je suis paumé, well, that you're lost. After this hour and a half, you don't seem very lost at all. Do you really feel lost? I don't know how you meant that.
Yeah, a little bit lost. I see myself through my children's eyes. You know, my children are here from Paris, and before they came, I put in a new shower, and my toilet broke. And the plumber came yesterday, like an hour before they were to arrive. And I was so nervous because it would be one more proof that I'm incompetent if they came into a house with no toilets. And he just saved me. He saved me. And now they're very happy with the new shower in the guest room, and the toilet is fixed. And all is well, but yeah, I'm a little paumé. Yeah,
I thought you meant it more in terms of being one part American and one part French.
I think I live in a kind of fog. I'm not paumé when I'm sitting and writing, but the rest of the time, yes.
So does anyone, Rachel, do you have anything to add, or is there anyone else that wanted to add anything?
People asked for you to come back, Susie. So
that was my question.
I'd like to come back in person, and then we could go to Marshall's.
Absolutely. We have a Marshall's. Did you know we have a Marshall's 3 minutes away from here?
Oh,
and I'm not kidding.
Oh my God.
We actually have 3 minutes that way and about 10 minutes that way.
And then we can eat cheesecake and have bagels and all the beautiful French food. Oh, a bagel.
But you can get bagels in France.
Yeah, I know.
C'est pas la même chose, huh? It's not the same thing. We have a bagel store here too. So
yes, bring me back in person, Marshall's and cheesecake.
Marshall's and cheesecake at the Cheesecake Factory, and we're all set. I personally would like to thank you for coming. I think this has been terrific. It was more than I hoped for. And I thank Rachel for our executive director for getting this all put together. And of course to Christine for reaching out to you in the first place, and for enticing you to come and join us today. And we have such a great turnout. And I thank everybody who joined us today as well. And I do encourage everybody, if you have not read I feel like Stephen Colbert. If you haven't read Mes 18 Exils, you can find it probably online and certainly at Albertine in New York, among other places.
And let me tell you how close I feel to you girls, Aileen, Christine, and Rachel. It's been wonderful. You should know, all the people who are watching us, there have been preliminary meetings, lots of emails, and Aileen wrote a thesis practically about me. She sent me 3 pages of questions, nearly giving me a heart attack a few nights ago, and it's just been wonderful being with you.
Thank you
I think
so
of all the
much.
questions we didn't ask.
Yeah, and thank
But
you.
I have two things to say to you. Travaille bien and have fun while you're doing it.
Yes, it's fun, and I do work hard.
You sound like you're having fun every day, and now all your diary is not reflective of the joy you exude every single day. So just keep having fun.
Yeah, let's just keep living, because that's enough. Living is enough. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
So thank you everybody for being there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Susie. And I would like everyone, you can unmute yourself if you want to thank Susie and clap, because I think this has been wonderful. And I would like to thank again Aileen and Christine as well for preparing this event. And you know, it would have been impossible without her and without the help of our cultural committee. But thank you again, Susie, because I think this is a great opportunity for our members to discover your work. And I will be sending them more recommendations, because we do have the possibility of having La Famille Trop de Filles and Mes 18 Exils, which they can buy from Albertine in New York City. So it will be a great opportunity for them to discover your work.
Very frustrating seeing all your faces. I know that it would be great fun to actually meet you.
Well, hopefully we can have an in-person event another time. You will be welcome to come back to Alliance Française.
And happy Halloween!
Happy Halloween, happy Thanksgiving, and get that Christmas stuff out, because the rush is going to be on next week.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Westchester.
So I am signing out.
Au revoir.
Okay.
Salut.
Au revoir.
Salut, au revoir.